Hi, I'm RobCosman. Welcome to my shop. Episode number 6 on the drawer making. So what we decided to do was each time we would feature a chest of drawers that I had kicking around, show it to you, and talk a little bit about it and see maybe if we can't give you some ideas. So, used to teach a class on obviously drawer making, and what I would do, because of the length of the class, I would provide the carcass already built, and then the students would build the drawers. And the idea was that we would actually go through the process and build one complete drawer, and then learn from that before we did the second one, learn from that before we did the third one. Instead of the normal way we would do something like that is we would build all three, or we would do every step 3 times and be efficient. But this was one I obviously done out of walnut and poplar. It's not finished. It's been sitting up overhead where all the other half-finished projects are from classes I've taught. But I'll just show you this. And unfortunately, I had that almost finished, and it's been dinged from being moved around. Tried to match the drawer fronts up. Could have done a better job than I did, but it was a teaching tool. As far as the carcass goes, it's solid wood. Can't even remember how we joined it, so as I look through this, maybe I'll figure out how. Top section, just doweled in place, obviously not glued in yet. The back is designed to be rabbited on. Big chunk broken off there. The top section could have been done, I gave them the option, they could either put dividers in here and have 4 small drawers or 2 long ones, and I'll tell you a little bit about the downside of doing that. Oh, that's what I did. So they're set into a dado. There's a rabbet on the bottom side, on one side, and then they're pin nailed. So, and they're glued and pin nailed, and that's a sufficiently strong enough joint, especially in an application like this where you have the bottom doweled, so there's no way that's going to spread. You've got the top. I think I doweled the top in place as well. So these aren't going anywhere, but just to give a little extra security, we nailed them in. And I probably did the bottom side the same way. You can see the backs of the drawers. Drawers are made out of poplar with solid pine drawer bottoms. I'll pull one of these out. Parts and pieces all over. It looks nice and clean. Now, still, the end lap, I think, is still too thin. Now this was another, no it's not. This one, if you can tell, I actually made it through dovetail and then added the piece on. You can see the glue line. This one was done as a half blind as was this one. Nice and clean, I have to admit that. But this is still just a little bit too thin for my liking today. Solid bottom, glued in front, should be bottomed out on the sides, and then held in place with 2 screws and slots, allowing that to move. I always let the tails run wild on the back side. I think I told you that yesterday. It's too bad I didn't get around to finishing this because it was a nice little piece of furniture. Now, I'm looking at those drawer sides. That, in my liking now, is too thick. I think that would have been better at about 7/16, maybe even 3/8, and it's just a strong half. Just a little bit too heavy for the size of the drawer. Needs a little fitting. So I had all kinds of these left over. This one I decided to paint white. Don't really like it. Painted it white and used white knobs, pine drawer fronts, tried to match them up. These ones, I don't know why I did this, but I have walnut drawer sides, aspen on the back, and cedar on the bottom. So there's a whole forest in this one. Same thing on this. Now, this is what we're going to tell you about. Your drawers being too long and shallow makes for a very difficult, you almost have to have the fit perfect or else it just has one tendency to bind. This one's not too bad because you're pulling it from the front, but you can't push that in. My test on the drawer and whether or not it fits properly, you should be able to push it in from one corner, and you certainly can't do that with these. Well, maybe that one I can. No, not if I get out there too far. Just not enough registration for the width. Not enough depth for the width of the drawer. Again, Aspen on the back. This one has plywood on the bottom. These would have been better if they'd have been divided up into 4 little drawers. And it hasn't had any use. Nobody's using it, so I have more drawers I know what to do with. All right, let me get cleaned up and we'll get started on our episode. Okay, we got to lay out the back. I want to lay out the back, get both pieces laid out, and I want to saw the tails. I also want to take you through the process of sharpening a chisel. Questions have been asked. And we'll go from grinding it to actually applying the secondary and tertiary bevel. So yesterday we got the layout done. Now I'm just going to transfer that. And anytime I do any of these transfers, I do it from the bottom, because the bottom, remember, is the part that we are not going to change. So I'm looking at the outside, which is where I do all of my layout. As long as my bottom is the same, then I can just carry this. But I also am going to switch and go to a fine ballpoint pen. I've got a red one, which, no, that's a roller ball. The reason I don't use roller ball is because they have a tendency to bleed. And what happens is that'll end up going down into the wood, particularly on the end grain. And then you've got to plane off even more to try to get rid of it. So save yourself the hassle. Set this right in the pinhole left by shoot, wrong one, it's at the back. But look at how much, maybe you can't tell from the video, but that red line really stands out. Works really well when you're dealing with mahogany or cherry or walnut, any of the dark woods. Trying to see the baseline. What I like about this dovetail marker, if I haven't already told you, it does 2 things at once. So with one setting, you're getting your line squared across the end, and you're getting your angled line down the face. Fewer steps, less opportunity to screw up. Now I'll turn this over and do the back. Now the back is a little bit complicated because we have to allow for the groove that's going to house the bottom. And I've got my bottom actually sitting over there, so it's already been milled. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember, these are 1/4-inch grooves. They are. And I'm up from the bottom just shy 1/4 of an inch. And I think I'm going to take it right off of this. So I'll take this, referencing off the bottom, just get that so that they're flush. And I'm doing this because I want them to be the same. Now when I do my drawer backs, at the back of the drawer, make sure these are correct. I'll show you something. Got to get this done first. Okay, we've got our marking gauge line on there. So the first one, this is where we make our cut. I can't reach all the way across with that, so I got to use a square. Wait a minute now, what's going on here? I'm doing the wrong one. Did I just do the exact opposite of what I said? Yes, I did. Glad I'm fully awake. I referenced the top off the bottom instead of the bottom off the bottom. Sorry about that. Now I gotta start over. I have 15 different marks on here. And I know you're asking, well, how do we actually lay it out? So just give me a minute and I'll walk you through that. Now I gotta scratch this out so as not to duplicate the error. Get them flush. They've got to be perfect, and they're not. That is. Careful not to bump anything. That's why I have a rubber mat. Okay, so here's my top half pin. And there's a bottom half pin. And the 1/4 inch groove will be cut over here and over here. And I'll stretch that out so I can see. So on this one, I keep this one straight or no angle. This one I slope. If you angle it, you end up with not enough material right here. Makes this piece weak. You want that piece to be full. I prefer this piece to be full because this is what ends up riding on the underside of the drawer as the drawer goes out to a certain point where it tips. So I prefer to have that one continuous piece instead of being interrupted by having your drawer back have a half pin up there, and then you've got a little bit of a spot right there. For what it's worth, I like this piece to go all the way. Whether that's sound reasoning for everybody, I don't know. Now, on this one, which sits right above the groove that houses the bottom, I do that one the same way. That one is straight or plumb as opposed to being sloped. Okay, identify these. Yeah, we'll gang saw the back ones, but we're going to do the front ones individually. Always identifying your waist. Especially when you go from doing front to back because you're used to cutting this whole piece off, but you got to remember, no, that's not going to be removed. I'm going to put a piece of tape on there because remember we have a really light marking gauge line, so it doesn't take a lot of stock removal in order to get rid of it. Now, we want this to be standing plumb. And let me explain why. It's two different types of dovetail saws. You could consider this to be a little bit of a commercial, but I'll try to keep it so it's not. So I said two different types of dovetail saws. There's hundreds of different saws, but basically you're going to have either a pistol grip handle or you're going to get a file-like handle. The problem with this, and I actually started out with this, so I'm telling you from experience, the problem with this is every time you pick it up, it registers in your hand differently. There's no reference point. So in a dark room, and you handed that to me, I would not be able to tell by holding onto the handle where the blade is. A pistol grip, As soon as you put it in your hand, it registers the same way every time. Why is that an advantage? Well, if you're constantly making plumb cuts, 10 degree to the left, 10 degree to the right, sooner or later you're going to actually be able to remember where those marks are. And if your saw registers in your hand the same way every time, you benefit from that. Call it muscle memory, call it whatever you want. Now, I'll continue with this for a moment before I address that. So, if my board is always standing plumb, my ability, as a result of repetition, to make a 10 degree sloping cut to the left is going to become something I can do without even thinking about it. Same with the right, same with plumb. Well, why not build up your skill and take advantage of something like that, as opposed to having this where every time you make a cut, you're having to watch the line because you have no reference. Now, what I did when I first started this, more years ago than I care to remember, I cut a little flat spot on there so that there would be some point of reference. So that registers against my thumb, so at least I know, and that's in my hand, that it's coming back to the same spot. But not what I would consider to be a dovetail saw that you should use. It just too light. In fact, I actually did a video, a YouTube, if you search, maybe we'll find it and put it in the description, where I showed you how to take, this is a Stanley saw. I think it sells in the hardware stores for, I don't know, $15. And I showed you how to go in and redo the teeth and redo the set so that it would perform. It's surprisingly, no, it's not quite straight, but close. However, you start using it and its shortcomings become noticeable really quick. This is stout, beefy, and it will cut till the cows come home. All right, so we're going to go in there. We're going to cut both of these at the same time. Big advantage, you've got a longer line to follow. When most people get into cutting small pieces like this, you're trying to reference a perpendicular cut. Have we talked about this at all? I don't know whether I'm repeating myself or not. Hopefully not. You're trying to make a perfectly perpendicular cut by reading the line. Half of that line is difficult. By doubling it, you're getting a lot more reference. So what I'm saying is it's a lot easier to do this than it is to come in and only try to do that with a 3/8 inch of material. Now, why is it so important that the cut be perpendicular? Well, when you do a dovetail, after you've made the cut, treat this as one solid piece. You're going to have a triangular shaped opening on this side. You're going to have a triangular shaped opening on this side. They need to be the same. Why? Because you're going to, after you've made your cut, you're going to come in and you're going to scribe somehow the pin from this bottom opening. But when you put the joint together, what you have scribed here, let's pretend here, all right, there's the mark that you just made from this opening as a result of having made these two cuts. Chisel everything out. When you put it together, you marked it. That was marked from right here. But when you put the joint together, that part right there that was marked is going to end up here. So if this triangle is not the same size as this triangle, either it's going to be too tight or too loose. One is a gap. One is it causes something to break because of the pressure built up of trying to force a piece that's larger than the opening. Real simple. So these cuts have to be perpendicular. It's the go, no go when it comes to cutting a dovetail. So when I teach the class, we typically do a 3-tailed dovetail, just like you see behind me, and there are 6 cuts involved, 2 on each side of the tail. If they're not all within our tolerance, then they've got to start over because you cannot fix it. Well, you can, but we're learning to do it so that we don't have to fix it. Now, I'll get my 6-inch square and I'll show you what the standard is that I use. There has to be a tolerance. You're not going to get it. I mean, you could stretch the zeros out past the decimal point until the cows come home. That's twice I used that saying. Try to not do it again. So there has to be some point where you say, okay, this is close. This will work. Now, I just want to make sure that this is standing plumb because it didn't quite look it, but it is. Get my lamp perfect, and by perfect I mean I want to be able to see this surface and this surface. I don't pay any attention to what's going on back here. if you have a good saw, whatever you're doing here and here is going to be the same over here. There's no reason to mark the backside of the joint. So we're going to come in here. Now, I have the advantage on my saw when I developed this 12 years ago was to put little tiny teeth on the front. So the first 2 inches, that's what the 22 represents. 22 teeth, or sometimes people call them points. So in every inch, you're going to find 22 points, or 22 teeth. And then from this point back, you're going to find 15 teeth per inch. That's not the only difference. The cutting face of these teeth is 0 degrees, very aggressive. The cutting face of these teeth is back to almost 30 degrees, very relaxed. So what you want to be able to do is to start the first little bit of that groove or curve so that you're right on the money where you want to be. And then as the big teeth come along, they're already set into a track, and away you go. Very little set, only 0.02 of an inch per side, which means once you get started, you can't alter the cut. It's going to continue on that path. That is advantageous, providing you get it started properly. Now, I'm doing this simply by experience and memory. That's my slope. If it's off, I have to live with it. But what I'm going to do up here, which is where I'm devoting all my attention, is I'm going to line that saw up perfectly with that red line. So all I see on the right side of my blade is pen mark. I think did I go through all this, Jake, yesterday when we did make the cuts in the front? I know I didn't go through this. Now, my standard is it must be within 1/8 of an inch over 6 inches. So if I take this, I'm out a little bit, I hope it's not too much. Make sure that the blade is sticking up in there far enough that it doesn't interfere. Lay that on there and then move it over. Now when I make contact right here, I'm out, but I'm out by, well, let's find out exactly. Where's my, I'm out by, got to use the 16ths. I'm out of 16ths. Looks a lot worse than that. So if you do the math, if I'm out a 16th over 6 inches, I'm out a 32nd over 3 inches. So that's down to here. I'm out a 64th over 1.5 inches. I'm out a 64th, sorry. 1/128th over 3/4 of an inch. And these are 3/8, so I'm out 256? 102/56 over 3/8 of an inch. Well, I can't even see that, so that's obviously within tolerance. More than 1/8, you got to stop and do it over. See if I can't perfect the next one. Line that up. Now, any of my adjustment has to be done down here with my feet because I never interrupt this, what I call natural sawing groove that I've developed over time. When I set my saw down, it's always going to sit in the same place, and that's going to result in a nice straight line from the end of the saw right up to underneath to my shoulder. So any adjustments I do, I wiggle my feet. And when you're new, you check every one. Okay, so that one's right on. Right on in terms of my ability to see. Now, we come to this one. This one's going to be plumb. So you're kind of having to change focus. I'm no longer doing a 10-degree slope. Now I'm going to go perpendicular. Wait a minute now. Oh yeah, this is where my, that's all those marks on there. This is where my groove is going to be cut to house the bottom. So come over here. This is a nice cut. Have a look. You'll see that it's right beside the line. I left all of the line right down here. Okay. And we'll check this one too. Now when we check this one, we've got to check it referencing the square on this side. So you got to get rid of this. I'm amazed. I teach this class so many times, and people will just come in there and they'll put their square on there, and there's all kinds of crumbs in there. You got to be accurate. Get rid of all that stuff. Then move your square in. And I've even had people that have bent the saw over. Oh, yeah, that's right. No, don't touch the saw. Stop wiggling, saw. Okay, so that one's right on too. Getting lucky. Let's go with it. Now we're back to making a 10-degree cut, sloping to my left. I don't tip up like this. Here's something I learned. Jake, come over here, please. Shoot from right there. I was in Florida teaching last year, I think it was, and I happened to be watching someone, one of the students. I was watching from directly across from him, and I noticed that he was having a hard time getting the saw started, and he was up like that. When you're up like that, especially with a regular saw, you have only 1 or 2 teeth in the wood. So that's a lot of pressure on 2 teeth, and it has a tendency to bite in. But if you lay down like that, and if this were 1 inch, you now have 15 teeth, in my case up here, 22 points distributing that same weight. Same idea of the guy that lays on the bed of nails, right? So with that little amount of pressure on each point, it's much easier to move the saw to get it started. So I prefer to keep it almost, well, I don't measure it, but almost level as opposed to tipping it forward or tipping it back. Now, I'm up against my fingernail, and I'm always pressing laterally to prevent that saw from sliding to the left or to the right. So I press laterally, I anchor this, get it in position. I'm just squeezing the 2 pieces so they don't vibrate. Let's check this one. Okay, that one's right on too. So far we only had 1 bad one. Can't get cocky though. Nobody gets a pass. Got to check them all. Okay, that's good. That double width is a big deal, particularly when you first get started. Now the last one again, and we're going to make a plumb cut. Okay, now take that tape off, check and see if we made it to the line. I'm going to treat these individually. There's a huge advantage to sawing right to your line. When you come to removing this waste, if you haven't made it to your line, you now have to come in with a chisel and literally carve that corner out. So much easier to have done it with your saw. So I'm going to go back in there, and just a couple of seconds with the saw will replace what could be a couple of minutes with a chisel. Let the saw find its way in. Don't force it. You don't want to alter that kerf. Now when I'm doing this, I'm holding the saw, so all I'm doing literally is pushing the saw and preventing it from falling on the ground. Let the kerf guide the cut, or guide the saw, sorry. Okay, those are all done. Now we'll go in and finish this one off. Just a little tip: if you don't want to be doing them gang saw, what you can do is just take a soft piece of wood, piece of basswood, piece of pine, piece of alder, back it up. Again, I want to make sure that this piece is standing plumb. You can even put a level Jake, you know where my little that little bench level is? Where? Oh yeah. You can put a level on there, which is actually more accurate than square. Now you can come in and just extend those lines. The other thing to be careful of too is people sometimes get sloppy when they're drawing their lines. Your saw is going to follow your line. So sloppy line, sloppy sawing. Now, I get the advantage of having more than an inch, but it's not going to be terribly difficult because I'm sawing through a relatively soft wood. Got to put that piece of tape back on. I cannot see those. All right, enough of that. Use it if you need it. The other advantage is it helps to stabilize a thin piece of wood. Let's just check it and see how I'm doing with the thin stock. That's a 1/16, maybe a little less. Huge advantage of having those little teeth on the front. Being able to go in there and accurately get that curve started. Okay, now I just remembered I forgot to do something. How are we for time, Jake? 27. Because I'm doing half blinds up front, I'm going to come in, put my saw back in the kerf, reach back, and purposely saw below the line on the inside. Do you see it? Jake, show them the drawer that we already did. Yes, you'll see it. Is it a big deal? No. Does it have an advantage? I wouldn't do it if it didn't. I'll wait and show it to you when we start marking the pins. I'm coming in and doing each one of them. Not on these ones, because these are through dovetails. Oh shoot, I never did do that one. All right, well the camera's running, we'll go ahead and finish this one off. And all our tails will be done. I was going to show you, I was going to do the whole thing anyway, so a little bit of repetition. Something might come to my mind while I'm doing this one that'll give you some more information I forgot about. Line that up. Now, if you notice, my preference is what's called the Scandinavian shoulder vise. And I'm often here and I rest on that. The more stable you can be, in fact, come over here for a second, Jake. I always tell people, I said, when you're cutting, we use the milk stool as an example. In case you're not familiar with it, most barn floors aren't terribly flat. So if you had a four-legged stool, it would always rock. If you take away one leg and turn it into a tripod, on any surface, it's going to be nice and stable. So I spread my feet rather wide, and I'm always holding onto the board. So 1, 2, 3. The more stable the platform, the easier it's going to be to become a good sawyer. So I get in here, do a little bit of wiggling around until I kind of feel that I'm getting in the right spot. If you were over there looking, you'd see that straight line going right up underneath my shoulder. Makes it really stable. I'm always pressing laterally against my fingertips. A little bit of wiggling with those 22 TPI. Get to my line on the front and then reach around back and just go a little deeper. Move over. I do it without even thinking now. I'm often asked, well, what am I looking at in terms of the slope? And I really can't tell you because I'm not 100% sure what I'm looking at. I suppose I take a glance at it once I start cutting and hope that I'm in the right, going at the right angle, but I'm not lining anything up. I don't use any reflection on the blade. Now, you'll notice when I come this way, I can't have both fingers here. I've got to move my thumb out. So I back my thumb off, bring it back in here somewhere to help anchor that index finger. And sometimes people have really sticky skin. So if you want, you can just bring that finger around more so that you're running off of your fingernail, which is even easier to slide the saw along. I'm always blowing off that dust. As soon as your saw starts moving, it's going to create a little bit of sawdust, and you don't want to obscure your line. Light, very, very light grip on the saw. Okay. We did cut them. Yes, we did. Front and back. No, I didn't. I didn't do the backs. I got to get that done. Forgot to cut the rabbit in the back. I'll show you how to do that on the table. So I told you I was going to do that this time, but I ran out of time. We'll do that next time. We'll cut our rabbits on the back. Cut the rabbits on the back and the tip. Oh no, we got to cut the rabbits on the back. Then we've got to cut our groove for the drawer bottom. Our drawer fronts, which are over here. Our drawer front is ready. It has to have the groove cut in it as well. And we've got to go in and we've got to make the drawer back the exact same length as the drawer front. So we've got to go in and I've got to show you how to do that. We'll get some of that done tomorrow. Whatever we don't, we'll get them done the next day. Quick little comment. Oh yeah, I was going to show. Sorry, no, why not? All right. Well, we'll put the chisel, sharpen the chisel off until tomorrow. Sorry, I forgot. All right. See you tomorrow.